Hi, good morning, good evening, our audience. Today, I have another speaker of our podcast, and Karin is going to. I know Karin for many years back, and she has been one of the experts in M&A integration. Today, we have selected a topic for M&A integration again, and Karin is going to give a very good, sharing her expertise, sharing her vast experience, the learning what she had she is going to share with us. I will have a couple of questions to share. And now I let Karin introduce herself. So it will be a good idea, Karin. Welcome, Karin.
Thank you. And thank you so much for having me. It's fantastic to be here. And just to give you a little bit of an introduction then to me. So I've spent the last 10 and a half years running my own business, Seven Transformation. And I do two things really. One is large scale transformations, and particularly relevant to this podcast, I do large integrations. Across the course of my career, I've done 50 M&A integrations now, everything from due diligence right through to post-acquisition and all of the challenges that integration brings. Before starting my own business, I was in IBM. I did several acquisitions there. Before that, I was in KPMG. So I've seen it on both sides. I've seen the entrepreneurial, doing it yourself, and obviously the big four and consultancy approach. And so really excited to be here today. Look forward to talking to you.
Thanks, Karin. So we have, I'm sure that this episode is going to be very interesting and due to many factors. And one of the important factors, Karin, you talk about your expertise of more than 25 years, working with large corporates, IBM, Accenture, KPMG, and so on. Also, now you run your own organization. So I'm sure that the experience what you have is very diverse. And I think M&A integration is also very diverse. So I'm sure that some of the questions I'm going to ask you, those will be very, very helpful for our audience. So let me start with my first question to you is, now I think we have seen last 2 years, M&A market have been up and down. But now what you feel about this M&A market? What is the current landscape right now?
Yeah, so I think it's probably worth saying I'm obviously sitting in London in the UK, and it's fair to say the M&A market is booming. I think there's a number of reasons for that. I think, M&A, I think is well said when it's a confidence game. So you've got more political certainty than you had before. You've got the end of the pandemic in sight. You've got strong capital markets, and you've got high confidence in the C-suite. So you've all read the stories, chief executives, big ticket deals, you've got blank check companies, you've got private equity swirling around. So it's incredibly buoyant. And the good news for people like me and for many of the people on this call is M&A skills, particularly integration skills, are in very high demand.
Right. So, when a company go for acquisitions, what is the first thing they should have in their mind? I know this is a very tricky question, and there is no right or wrong answer. There is no set of questions, but this is very interesting, right? So whenever we go for any acquisition, this is the first question to ask. What is your view in what they have to?
Yeah, I think the first thing, normally if I get involved really early with a client, it will be, why are you buying it? So what's your rationale? What are you really trying to achieve? Because there are many ways, as we know, to create value in a business, and M&A is obviously one of those. So for me, it's saying, what are you trying to achieve with the deal? Is it a merger of equals? Are you trying to buy IP or assets? Is it simply a takeover? Is it a bolt-on acquisition? So I think for me, it's what's the real objective of the deal? Because ultimately, as many of you will know, that objective then very much ties to the type of integration that you might take on. So are you keeping it separate? Are you integrating it? Or indeed, are you using the integration to completely redesign your operating model?
Right. So that adds to another question. So as you said that when we go for any acquisition, there are certain things you keep in mind, right? Now, when you say I'm assuming that you kept all this point and you say that, yeah, this is the company we want to acquire. But how you are going to define the success of this deal?
Yeah, it's a really great question. It's one with my current deal. I should confess that we're 2 days from day one in my current deal, so it's hectic. But I think what overall for me is, did you create value for the business? I think what I often see and where organizations can get it wrong is they think about success as being a plan completed. You know, we've done the retention, we've done this really. And I recommend to everyone having an integration scorecard set up pretty early on, is you track the metrics of the business. So you track your cost takeout, you track your EBITDA. So it's really about impact made. And for me, you can also think about that in a number of different dimensions. So I often think about the customer dimension. So did you minimize disruption for the customer base? Did you create positive sentiment, you know, about the merge? And did you capture those revenue and growth opportunities from the customer? From a people perspective, which is, you know, another important one. Did you create an organization that people want to work in? Did you retain your top talent? So for me, I start thinking about the impact we want to make on the business as the ultimate measure of success.
Mm-hmm. So as you said that you are in between a deal. So yeah. So what current challenges you see now today? Because you are very closer to day one, right?
Yeah. So day one is Friday, which is always interesting. I mean, I think for me, there are, you know, I always think about sort of a number of lessons that I've learned over time. First one is, I would never assume one deal is like the previous one, because I've seen certainly organizations think, okay, we did it that way, we need to do it that way again. And it's very natural and normal. But the first one I would say is a watch out that you're not just thinking about how did we do it last time. I think the other one is, you know, think about how you use the deal to optimize your business. So it gives you an opportunity to think about your operating model and think about, you know, how do you redesign your business? And I think the best organizations often think along those lines. The other thing that's always close to my mind is not doing too much change all at once. And so for me, particularly in the run up to day one, what can the organization absorb, and what are the things that you really need to do? Because you can often be tempted to do a whole raft of things. And then, you know, I always think about the people element. So how are you going to safeguard your people assets and your customer assets? What's going to retain, you know, both of them? And for me, I guess it's making sure that balance between business as usual and integration. So you want people to be focused on your base business. You don't want to take your eye off the ball.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think I had one question, you know, just connected to this. So when is the right time for the, you know, company who is going to acquire another company? What is the right time to, you know, maybe inform to customers or partners?
Yeah, early on, I would say, because typically what happens is the minute you know, you've made the approach, it gets put into the press even before, you know, you get to day one. So your customers are reading about it. And I think the last thing you want is your customers to be being fed by the press. And so I always encourage organizations early on. So even if we've not bought the company yet, you'll have read that we've made, you know, an approach, and reassure customers quite early on in terms of what it means for them, i.e. your service is not going to be disrupted. And then over the course of the communication, I think what you're trying to get to is, it comes back to that value piece again. So how can you make customers feel like they're going to get extra value? We're buying X because of Y, and this means for you. And it should always focus on the benefit for them. What's really going to be different?
Right. I think same applies to even employees, internal employees, maybe partners, because everybody wants to know what is the value you are going to get out of this deal.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's critical. I think you spot on. I think suppliers the same. What does it mean in terms of them? Are they still going to, ultimately people go back to the basics. Am I still going to get paid on time? As our contract changing? Am I still dealing with the person I know who I've dealt with for the last 10 years? So the relationship piece. And yeah, same with employees. I think you have to take them on that journey and explain what it means and be very, transparent and upfront. I think the worst scenario is if you're, trying to hide things or you get a series of mixed messages. That's exactly what will not be productive in the culture. So I think it's really important for people, you're taking them on that journey and you're telling the story as you go.
Right, got it. So I have another question which could be very tricky, So my question is, how do you successfully integrate two companies? So keyword is successfully integrating two companies. So I know there is no straightforward answer, but more I'd like to understand from your experience, the type of deal you have done and the variety of deal you have done, right? So 70 plus deal are not less. So what do you think in your way that what is the way of successful integration of two companies look like for you?
Yeah, it's a really great question. I think I can look at it on a number of dimensions. So I think one success criteria for me is, did we bring ultimately two cultures together? Because again, my experience would say that even if you're buying a company right in your sector that you perceive to be similar, culturally is bound to be different because there's different leadership, there's different processes, there's different cultural norms. So for me, success is you bring successfully two cultures together and create something that's bigger and better than those would have been if they're separate. And the same from if you think about your operating model, how have you brought that together now to create value, and what does it look like? And a part of that is, what is that customer proposition? And then the other one, we can't get away from a conversation about synergies. Ultimately, there's a tie back to the value case. So success for me is that we're achieving the value case, and that's both you're taking out cost, but you've also got an upside case, so you can see a much bigger kind of opportunity. And then successful integration, there's some real practical things that you can do, and one is we'll come on, I'm sure, to talk about this, but your integration management office is critical. That's something you need to set up early on, way before day one, because ultimately that is the vehicle by which you do all of your planning and getting ready for day one. So having a clear structure, a clear process, really important to have clear accountability. So many of your leaders will be focused on running their business and doing what they need to do to run the base business. And so it's important to think about what's the integration organization that you need to create. Maybe it's, for a short period of time, depending on how acquisitive you are. But that's critical for me in terms of the whole integration process.
Right. So I think, as you spoke about integration management office, so what is the right time to set up the integration management office? And maybe you can give some idea about day one, before day one, how it should be look like.
Yeah, no, absolutely happy to do that. So I've set up integration management officers, everything up to 6 months before day one. So in that sense, you're setting them up at risk, in essence, because as you know, things can scupper the deal. You have competition markets authority, so things can get in the way. So typically I've set it up everything from 6 months before, let's say up to about 3 months before, depending on the size complexity of the deal. The integration management office for me is important because what you look for it for is to keep the drumbeat. So what you're looking for is a regular cadence of meetings, of information, of decision making that really drive and create that kind of drumbeat in the organization. So it's like running, a business transformation. It's the nucleus of the program that gives you the updates, the information that you need, and brings everyone kind of together.
And how long, you said about like 6 months in advance, you set up this IMO office. How long they, go entire, they work entire integration
Yeah, so yeah, great question. So I've run then the integration for everything up to about 12 to 14 months after day one. So it comes back to what I said originally, which is what's the genesis or what's your integration thesis? And so if you're doing a bolt-on acquisition, I mean, really, it's not going to take long. Obviously, if you're doing a full operating model change, that's when it takes time to bed in. So yeah, anything up to 12 to 14 months after day one, I've stayed around in the organization to make sure, you know, it is working and it transitions again back into business as usual.
Right. So I think I had similar experience in one of the deals, which was very complex, full operating model. And we were trying to, do the full integration. And I think 6 months in advance, we have IMO team set up. There was a leader identified, there's a team around it. So I just related to that, I have one question, because that time I never had this doubt that who could be a person to be selected as a IMO leader. So,
yeah.
yeah. So there any, my question is more like, who should be the IMO leader? Somebody from business, somebody from external, or somebody internal who have taken the role? So just if you can give some idea about your experience in setting up IMO, who is the IMO leader?
Yeah, no, really great question, because I've seen all of that work. I've seen a permutation where it's a consultant coming in from, you know, a McKinsey, Bain, BCG, Big Four, restructuring practice. I've seen it being, you know, someone like myself who's working independently, and I've seen someone get seconded in from the business, right? And so I think for me, it comes down to skill set. So you need someone who has credibility across the business. If I think about when I go in, I will go to the board. So I will be responsible for taking the chair and the non-exec on the journey. I'll be part of the executive for a period of time, working with them and taking them on the journey. And so I think whoever does the role and whatever their background might be, there's credibility. You've got to be able to hold the board and the executive to account. So that's one. Second, I think it's useful to have people who've done it before. There comes, when you've done so many integrations, pattern recognition. Right. And so you know the things to look for. And I think if you're a first-time person going into that role, I would say always do it with support. And that's not, I'm a big fan, by the way, of people developing a new skill set. But I think if you've never done it before and suddenly your CEO says, congratulations, you've been appointed as the IMO leader, I would seriously get some support around you, whether that's coaching, mentoring, whether that's working with a consultant or a big consultancy, because there are certain things that you absolutely have to do. I separate the role. So when I'm in the integration director role, I will always hire myself a PMO, and sometimes in smaller deals, they can be an integrated role. And so I think about that PMO role as being someone who creates the plan, the integrated plan, someone who creates the templates, someone who works day in day with the work streams, understanding where they are, the risks, the dependencies, all of that great sort of project management stuff. The other thing about the IMO leader is really you've got your antennae like across the whole business. So you're working with all of the functions, you're working with the exec, you've got the board, you've got your own core team. So I think about the IMO as like a core team where you've got change management, communication skills, and then you've got work streams across all of the functions. And so you need, part of the IMO director's role is making sure all of that works together. And the other success I've had is having someone in that core team who keeps the score. So it goes back to the synergy case. I did this, you know, financial analyst type background. You need someone who's going to track your synergies. The other final thing I will say is you've got to be pretty tough. You know, this is not a faint-hearted role. There's going to be clashes. You're bringing two sides together. There's a lot of politics. There's a lot of personal, what does this role mean for me? So there's a lot of sensitivity. So I often talk about having the IQ and the EQ. You need the intellect to be able to understand and what is often quite a complex situation, but you need the EQ because actually you're dealing with emotions. You know, you've got a CEO who's perhaps buying something with a new CEO coming in. How is that going to manage? How are the two leadership teams going to work? For people at all levels of the organization, what does it mean for them? So there's a real kind of emotional element to the role and being sensitive to that.
Got it. Yeah, very helpful. I think this role itself is very important. And I think, as you rightly said, starting from 6 months ahead of the deal, and then after, at least 12 to 14 months of the deal. So I think it's a long journey. And they have to, and one another point, I think I'll just add here that, the person should have lots of patience because he have to change everyone. He have to change all esteemed leaders. He have to change, other, communication guy, creating content, making sure things are right, combining everyone in one room maybe, and making sure that they are delivering, right? Because they are one who are driving everyone. So it's lots of patience. I think, as you rightly said, that the person have to drive everything and make it happen.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think the driver that you've described is right. And it's the balance, isn't it? Because you need to be tough enough to make it happen, but you need to be sensitive enough because people are often being asked to do things on their day job and you want to maintain good relationships. And so it's that sensitivity, isn't it, between the pushing and the driving and the sensitivity and the empathy that helps you kind of bring people along.
Right. Okay, so I'll come with some other, very interesting ones. So, we are setting up entire integration team. The IMO team is set up now. What are the top, integration risks when you have done so many M&A deals and integration deal especially? What are the top risks you have seen in integration, and how, if you can describe some your experience, how what are the early risks? How you have mitigated them, what was the risk which you could not mitigate also? You can share something like that if you have.
Fantastic. Yeah, so I could talk a lot about integration risks. So let me maybe pick on a few. So I think I've already alluded to people and culture is absolutely a risk because you're bringing two very different potentially organizations together and asking people to make it work. So how do you do that? So for me, I always try and find culturally what's important in the organization that you're acquiring. And it can be simple things. It can be small symbols. One organization, for example, I was working with had a really strong health and safety culture. And so they would have health and safety moments on all of their meetings. So really simply, you can adopt something like that. It makes people feel like you're respecting the culture. Now, I've also worked in deals. So the current deal I'm working on is one where the organization is very clear. You come into the organization, you adopt our way. We've got a way, a way of working. But still, I always think it's important to try and find that, what's really important to people. If there's something you can do, even if you're asking them to adopt new values, new behavior, new mission, vision, values, I think that's really important. I've also worked with organizations. I was working with an organization in the Middle East, certainly over the pandemic, and they used it as an opportunity actually to change their culture. So they used the organization coming in and their own organization to come up with a new purpose, a new mission, a new set of values, and they rebranded the company. So it felt like it was bringing together two equal companies and creating something better. So culture's one, and I think, best practice is find those symbols, find things that people will attach to. Second one, which we've talked about as well, is a risk is around your customer. So competitors will strike when you've got a deal announced, because they'll believe you take your eye off the ball and your customers are therefore right for them to come and sell to. So one is really make sure that you are engaging with your customers at every stage in the journey. Make sure that they are understanding what's going on and you've got a value proposition for them. The other one is around leadership. So you're very dependent on your leaders to make sure that they are bringing their teams along the journey. And I have a preference that I think you settle your leadership roles quite quickly. and well before day one, because otherwise, if you've got instability at the top, you're going to surely have instability under that. So if you stabilize your leadership there, then actually they can be your allies in stabilizing the people underneath that. I think another one for me, you can sometimes get into a situation where you've got a deal team who's been focused on the deal, you know, signing off the TSA, making sure legally what you're buying is what you think you're buying. There's a whole set of steps for a deal team. So risk for me is that the deal team and the integration team are on two different paths. And my way around that is I always have someone from the deal team being represented in the integration team, whether that's the lawyer, whoever is most appropriate. Because actually, if you look at a number of the activities that happen, so for example, when you're creating your transitional service agreement, your TSA, you really want to make sure you're not screwing over your integration team by negotiating something that is impossible then to deliver. So another risk I see, and one I think is important, is that the deal team and your integration team are tightly interlocked and not seen as two different teams where there's a kind of imaginary wall in there. So I think all those, and then I think I'll always talk about communication. I think communication is so important. It's like any major change in an organization. Don't under communicate, because that creates anticipation, worry, and people will fill the gap. So if you're not providing information, then for sure people will start to imagine what the answer is. And so I think the more open communication you can have, two-way communication, frequently asked questions, recognizing you can't be transparent on every element, but really use communication as the vehicle that helps you keep people engaged, motivated, and on point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that brings another very important point, which I have always had this question. So as you said, communication is so critical and very important for success of the deal. Many times I have seen that the people who are closing the deal, they never see the integration team. They even don't know who is the integration team. Right? And this is, I think, most of the time I have seen this happens. The deal team is sitting somewhere, they close the deal, they negotiate the deal, and maybe it is done. Maybe business people, there could be 1 or 2 persons from M&A team, they are involved in the very basic deal closing process. But many of other people, they never meet each other. So I remember in some of the deal, we created a proper handover process. And this handover process, we really make sure that we follow. As soon as deal is closed, day one, there is a process of handover. So the integration manager is not surprised the day he have got the responsibility to drive the deal. He knows exactly what has happened. Of course, the best practice is to involve him too much early in the deal, right? When you are thinking about a deal, integration manager should be ready. But this generally never happens, right? Most of the time, the integration manager comes last. So how you think that we should, I know there are lots of best practices from you to hear, but what are the top you think that we should do as a part of handover process from deal closing team to integration team? What is some of the best practices you have followed and something which works very well for you?
Yeah, so it works really well for me. So typically when I go into an organization, I will spend an inordinate amount of time with the deal team. So I will really understand, what they're negotiating, where they are on the TSAs, what are some of the challenges that have arisen. And I think, I mentioned I will ultimately have at least 1 or 2 of the people from the deal team in the integration planning, because there are areas I've mentioned, like the TSA and your reverse TSA, potentially if you have both ways in place. That's an area where you have to be working hand in glove together. So for the deal team, they're ultimately negotiating it, but your integration team are saying, well, actually, to deliver the payroll or to deliver this in the supply chain, we will need them to provide this for 6, 12 months. So I think that's a particularly critical one. The other thing that happens to me quite a lot on deals is ultimately things get renegotiated. So I've been in situations where the deal team have brought forward day one. So they've brought it forward 1 to 2 months. And again, if you were doing that in absence of the integration team, you could potentially be left in quite a difficult spot because all your planning is based on particular day one assumptions. And then I always join the deal calls. So where the lawyers are negotiating, I will be on those calls because again, you can pick up on nuances and subtleties around what's been negotiated, what's important. You're picking up the culture of the other side. You're understanding what's important to them. Often I get involved. So again, there's been a number of renegotiations on price in some of the deals I've done. And so again, whilst it's not fully the integration by any means responsibility, you need to understand the nuances of those negotiations that are happening, because again, it has impact obviously in your integration team. So for me, I think it's a great point. I think the two teams have to be quite closely woven in. The other one is around the data room. So again, the deal team tend to have a clean team, and obviously they've got all of the data and information. And again, I look to have access to that because again, that they are critical data points. Obviously being aware of gun jumping rules and sensitivity, but I think if you're going in and leading the integration, you need that access to the tools.
Right. So, as you rightly pointed out, this is the, critical gap to fill. So when we build MergerWare, I think one problem which always I had this while I was doing integration is meeting these two teams. They never meet, right? And they have certain set of documents which is with the deal team, those who have closed. Integration team, they have half information. Maybe they have few slides, but they don't have all information. They might not be aware on all the top risk, which is already identified by these guys, right? The people who close the deal, they might have early risk and they might have identified, but they are lying in some document and it is not in possession with the integration manager. So what we build within MergerWare, we have built a handover process. So as soon as day one, when we are going to close the day one, there we have a handover process where all the tasks, the documents, there is a proper checklist, there is a team who is onboarded to take over those documents and identify top risk and making sure that this process is fully complete. And this was one of the practical difficulty when I was working in M&A. This was very tedious process because there is a document is sent to so many people because there are certain list of documents, certain list of action to be done by individuals. And then what happened? There is no one to track it. So what we have done is we have built this within the platform so that all the information are together. And if I'm integration manager, I can go and view those documents whenever there is a time. Whenever I need, I can go and do that. So that way we are trying to make sure that this process is completely done. So this was one of the problems, when I was in one of the largest deals we worked. There was a big team and there is a, so many people sitting in deal closing. There are certain team who are working remotely. They are sitting in some country. They are working on some action plan, but they never see each other. Of course, they will send those documents by email and sometimes it is lost. So we have automated this whole process within MergerWare. So I think this is a great point, so thanks for bringing this topic. It's very important handover process.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I could not agree more.
Right. So I think, 77, 78 deals you work, so many companies. I know that the deal variety will be different market segment, different type of deal you have done, integration you have done. What is the main success criteria for what is your 3 or 4 words you can define integration success for you?
Yeah, integration success in 4 words for me. Did we deliver the value? So maybe I've got 5 words, but ultimately that is it. Can you see bottom line and top line impacts in the business as a result of buying this company? Did we manage the integration seamlessly to make that happen? In a nutshell, it's did you deliver the value?
Right. So this our podcast is mostly listened by most of M&A practitioners, especially integration practitioners. So what are some advices you think, based on your experience, you'd like to give to them?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Great question. I think for me, I'm going to go a bit soft and say, I think have fun.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting process. These are great projects to be part of. I think anyone listening who's not been on an M&A project, I would say get on one, take a role because they're great fun. I think you've got to really be prepared to work hard. So my typical days start early and go on late. So I think, it's a roll your sleeves up. But I've honestly met some of the best people I've known on these deals and, remained in touch with them for 20 or so years. They feel like family. So I think it's a great experience to have. I think the second one for me is I always think about a marathon, not a sprint. And so, there's a temptation to run really, really fast. And, and I'm as guilty as the next person of doing that. But I think for me, it's don't try and change everything at once. As we established, you could be 18 months in the game. So take it step by step. You don't need to do everything in the sequence and pace that you think you do. And then the relationship's always interesting with the acquired business. So whenever I go into an organization, I'll be told everything from, it's a very fractious relationship. They've not done what they said they do. They've kind of been acquired, but they're not really in it. The mindset isn't there. So for me, I always go in with the intent of building a really great relationship with the business that's been acquired, because I think what you really want to do is you want them to make them feel part of the family. And this is way before day one. They will look to you for symbols and cues about how important they're made to feel. And so for me, I spend a lot of time when I can in person, and that's been the downside of the last 18 months, but really get to know people, get to know their ambitions, how they can play a role in the future. I don't think you can say that too much, because where I've seen it, and I've seen this go wrong, is an organization will kind of keep them at arm's length, won't be necessarily thinking them as an equal, and the relationship's fractured before you start. So for me, that can't probably emphasize enough the importance of building those relationships.
Right. So, when you said about, how some of the key takeaway, I think a couple of things which I would like to add here. One of the large integration program where I was involved. So there used to be a face-to-face meeting between at least the key leaders, the PMO or integration management office key members. We used to have several co-location meetings, and that was very helpful because we see each other, right? And this team consists of the company who got acquired, their team plus our team. And it was very, very efficient. It was very effective because everybody know each other now, right? When they went back to their countries, it was very easy work for them. They can take the phone call, ask some questions whenever they had. So I think this is a very good point. I think communication, making sure that people are involved very early in the deal. This makes lots of difference. So now, since 18 months, almost more than that, we have, we are not been meeting people. So what do you think that's changing after pandemic? What is how integration is going to change?
Yeah, no, it's a really great question. And let me build on your point, because I think your co-located meetings are exactly what I would do. And unfortunately, there have been times through COVID and this whole pandemic where it's not been possible to do that. So for me, one of the changes is definitely teams are remote. And most of the integrations I'm working on, to be fair, are global. And so, of course, I can't get around everyone all the time anyway. So I think you really have to think about how can you integrate people and make them feel part of the family, but like we are on a screen at the moment. So I've done a number of things, from the informal coffee chat. So certainly through the pandemic, I wasn't just having formal meetings. I would put half an hour in at 8 a.m. called coffee catch up. And it was as simple as there was no agenda, and we just basically said what was going on in our lives. So I don't think you can underestimate the importance of the water cooler conversation, and how can you make that happen remotely. So that's definitely one. I've seen, and I've got experience of this right in the moment of when you're acquiring an organization, they may have set different policies around working from home. So an organization currently I'm working with is buying a company where they've said you can work from home if you want for and the organization that's buying them has said you need to be in the office 3 days a week and 2 days flexibility. So the other thing that's a big challenge at the moment is how do you think about those policies, because it is quite hard to undo a policy where the mindset has been changed. So that's another one. And then culturally, I think with all the will in the world, and I've seen, you know, great templates and great culture diagnostic tools, and I've used them all, but actually the way you get a real read on culture is you spend time in their offices, right? You look what's on the walls for the symbols, you look how they've laid out the office, you look at what they're wearing. Culture is one of those things that you can't pick up on until you're in the room. And unfortunately, COVID and the pandemic has meant that we couldn't pick up on those cultural signals, and we couldn't also really have those conversations that you might have around what does it mean for me. So, you know, the off the record conversations of tell me what's important to you, what's going on, you know, for you personally. And so you do have to find ways. And again, it's why I've been setting up, you know, more informal chats with people to find out, you know, what's going on in their world. Because as much as we like Zoom and it's efficient, right, and you can get a lot more done, and it is certainly, you know, is easy, it does somehow put a professional barrier between two people. And so, you know, how do you break that down? But on the other hand, I've never seen a deal environment so dynamic. And so we have to adapt to these things. So we have to find tools. Interestingly, you know, I was saying to the team this morning, are we going to have are we all going to get around a whiteboard, because we need to make sure the integrated plan. And if you can't do that in person, then let's find the tools. There are many tools out there that enable you. So I think those are the sort of, really, when you're in it, some of the kind of distance challenges.
Right. I think it's a very good point. We lots of, you know, even if you look at deal making process, I remember a few years back when we go and talk to customers and say, okay, we can, you know, set up MergerWare remotely. They say, how? Now they say, okay, so we are in between, you know, a large deal implementation where almost 100 key team members are working across all the deal life cycle. They are using MergerWare, and entire their training, onboarding, the M&A playbook, you know, walkthrough, how we are going to, you know, so initially we have set up their entire M&A process sitting remotely. And we are having call almost on daily basis. We see each other like this. And I think it is very, very helpful, and we are progressing very fast than, you know, earlier meetings. So now things have changed. I think adoption of the platform like Zoom, if you look at Zoom, during pandemic and post-pandemic, so much difference now. Everyone is using now. And similarly, M&A platform. A few years back, you know, people were afraid of security, what will happen, how my information will be stored. Now it becomes like so easy for people. You know, you can do entire deal execution sitting at your home. You don't have to come to office to do that. And I remember one of our customers 2-3 years back, when the situation was quite good, we wanted to really visit them and, you know, train their staff. And we had a first job was to set up their M&A playbook, understand what is working, what is not working, and our team wanted to go and really support them. When we asked them that, okay, maybe we propose that 2 or 3 of our people from team, they will go and work along with your team. That will be much efficient process. And then they say, no, we work from home. So we are almost 30 to 40 M&A guys who need to start working on MergerWare. They all are in US, but all are in different cities. So cost of bringing everyone together is much higher than, you know, our overall cost. So we realized that how tools like you know, MergerWare, Zoom, and all this become very, very efficient, and people have adopted very well. So this becomes you know, very easy. Entire integration team can work together. they can have better collaboration abilities, right? They can do face-to-face talk on Zoom. When we can integrate Zoom within MergerWare. Any tool you want to integrate, we can do that. So there is no problem now. So it's a more like, the benefit of being together, sitting in a room. This have turned down to Zoom and other meetings.
Yeah.
So I think, there is some benefit also from this pandemic. The adoption of platform becomes very, very easy compared to a few years back.
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
So I think I have lots of questions, but I would like to really thank for your time and very insightful discussion. I think a couple of points you brought it, which were in my mind to ask from you, and I know we are going to do another very soon, where I'll come with some additional points which I have taken a note out of this discussion, and we'll set up another podcast very soon. Thanks for your time, and look forward to hosting you again.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Khaled.